I used to be terrible with money. Absolutely terrible. When I was a teenager. Of course, nowadays I'm much more responsible. I don't get takeout constantly or something like that. I make very cheap, simple meals, and I try to preserve what wealth I have by spending it only on things that I need, like electricity, therapy, food, and cheap food at that, and so on. But from 13 to 19, I was in a different world. And even though I was much more desperate economically back then, whenever I had money, I would spend it stupidly. I would spend it stupidly because I simultaneously did not truly understand the value of the money that I had, nor did I understand what it could go to for that matter. Like the fact that you can get so many meals for so cheap, that was not something I properly understood at the time. But also, at the same time, I didn't care about the value the money had. I didn't care about that because I didn't care about myself. I spent so much of my time during those years, both prior to my first transition and after that, up until I detransitioned, thankfully, I spent all that time being incredibly depressed and suicidal. And during my early teen years, prior to becoming 18, I was depressed because I had no freedom. I had no freedom to go anywhere. I was completely under the boot of my parents and then under the boot of my dad, which was way worse than my mom. But then when I turned 18, I had a lot more freedom. The problem was I was pretending to be transgender online, which was, of course, disastrous for me because a lie is not just one lie. It must be covered up by many consecutive lies. And I was in the business of lying all the time, which was chipping away at my mental health. And as I was being celebrated and lauded by people for being so brave and wonderful and all these other things, I was silently feeling terrible at the imposter I had become. And so, of course, I wanted to kill myself all the time, in spite of the gains that I made in my mental health after turning 18. And so what did I do? Whenever I had money, I spent it, and I spent it irresponsibly. I would buy tons of video games that I didn't need. I would get takeout food when I didn't need it pretty regularly. I had all these gadgets that I didn't need. And in general, I was spending it stupidly. I was going to places that I should not have gone to, that I did not need to go to, when I should have been saving my money and trying to figure out what the hell I ought to do with it. I wanted to kill myself. But more than that, I did not believe in myself. Because as all of this was happening, I had fed myself, and many others had fed it to me as well, this narrative that I couldn't do anything. It was something my dad said to me many times, but it was also something that many toxic people that I hadn't learned to avoid online had said to me many times. It was something I said to myself many times. And so the people who said the opposite were drowned out by all of these loud negative voices that I chose to listen to, some of whom were particularly important to me, such as my father. Unfortunately, he was important to me up until recently. Thankfully, I've learned that I am a much better man than him, but up until now, I did not understand that. So I was listening to the things he would say as well. They would affect me in a way that they don't now. And I had internalized such a negative view of myself. And so every minor attempt I had made at escaping that house, a house where I would stay in my room for days on end, literally starving myself because I was too afraid to leave the room because there were so many ex-convicts smoking meth and shooting up in the living room or in my dad's room. I didn't want to be seen by them. I didn't want to interact with them. I just wanted to be left alone, and yet my house was being torn apart and essentially turned into a crack house. steakhouse. And so I had this logic that I used to internally justify my behavior in regards to, for example, ordering food all the time. No, I can't possibly get groceries because if I were to get them, it would be eaten by these people. No, I can't possibly get groceries because if I were to get them, I wouldn't be able to cook and eat the food because these people would see me way too quickly before I could get in and get out. And so, with the money that I had, I would get food delivered because I could just run out of my room, get it from the door, and then run back in. And that was how I justified what I did. It was based on the fear that I had of the dangerous and unpredictable people my father would have around, which is more justifiable than I was just impulsive and depressed and wanted to kill myself and didn't care about myself at all. Believe me, that was a component to the story, but the overwhelming, overriding, overarching component to the story that we ought to be focusing on here was the fact that I was so scared to leave my room because I had reasons to be scared to leave my room. So I was bad with money, but I was also bad with how I behaved in response to my environment. Because the reasonable response to an environment like that is to leave it. It's to go somewhere else. And I had the money to go somewhere else. I had the money to get a place for a couple months as a short-term rental, and I could have held that down while looking for work in one of these places that I've always wanted to live in. The problem was I didn't believe I could do it. I thought any job that I get is not going to work because either, number one, I'm not going to be able to get the job because they'll find out that I lied about having a high school diploma, or number two, they're not going to hire me because I have no work experience. And then I thought, well, what if I get the job? What's going to happen after that? My credit is so bad from this unpaid medical debt that no place will rent to me, surely. And then I thought, well, even if I didn't have this debt, because I have no credit score, or no credit history rather, then no place will rent to me either. What if all of these places require 3 times the monthly rent to be your income? I had all this swirling in my head. I hadn't even considered roommates. I did a little bit later, but then I started to think, well, I would be so scared of these people because of my social anxiety. I had 1,000,001 reasons as to why I could not do what I needed to do. The reality of the situation was I should have just tried anyway. I should have just tried. And ultimately that's what I ended up doing much later. After turning 20, I went to Wyoming and I held down a job for a little bit. Of course, that resulted in me not sleeping constantly and having multiple mental health outbreaks and almost killing myself and a bunch of crazy shit. I'll get into that in a different video, but that's when I actually tried. I tried to confront my fear of other people. I tried to confront my problems with impulsivity, with mental health, with fear in general, and I learned a lot of things from that experience. It made me a more worldly person, but what did I do? I ended up going back straight to that house and playing with all my toys and gadgets. And the logic behind a lot of the stuff that I bought when I had money was pretty simple. It was, I'm going to be trapped in this room forever because I'm so disabled and non-functional as a person. So I better just make the room as livable as possible. I had bought a microwave, a fridge, a nice TV that I had always wanted, a bunch of books to read, video games, and a way to upscale them on my TV, all kinds of different stuff. A bunch of posters for the room as well to make the room look nicer aesthetically for me, so I would be put into a positive mood when I looked around. These things were all placed with the intention of improving my mental health. The posters would spark joy because they reminded me of things that I liked, and the fridge and the microwave were put there with the goal of me feeding myself, of ensuring that I would eat. And that was also important because prior to getting that fridge, a lot of the time I was not eating because there were scary people over. But the problem that ended up arising with that fridge was the circuit breakers in the house couldn't handle that much power at once. So if I ran the fridge and my computer at the same time, sometimes that would result in there being a brownout in the house, and you would have to go to the box and flip a switch to get the power back on. So for how old that house was, it actually wasn't great to run the fridge at the same time, so a lot of the time the fridge ended up just being unplugged, which was unfortunate. I should have gotten like a rice cooker or something like that. I had entire plans on like how to do dishwashing and then pour the water out the window when I would spend more time in the room. I had all these plans for like how I could make the room a little apartment that didn't come to fruition because things ended up changing later. Now, what ended up changing later was my mom getting her own place. So I did a video talking about when I ended up becoming homeless after I attempted suicide from living at my dad's place. I attempted suicide, and then I basically just told my family, yeah, I'm fucking leaving. I can't be here. This place is driving me insane. And then I was homeless for a while. My mom gives me a call and tells me that she gets a place. And then I go to live at the place my mom got. And that place ended up just being a short-term rental. The guy wanted her out because he found somebody else to rent that place to for double the money, and because there was no written agreement, there was only a verbal agreement, she ended up getting booted from that place. And so more time goes on, and we go back to my dad's place, and then many months later, this year, she gets a new place, and then I end up coming here. And this time, the place is actually legit, and I'm staying here. But after she got booted from that place, and actually a bit prior to that, that's when I started being good with money. After my first job, and me coming back to that place, and me being homeless as well, I ended up being pretty good with money. I ended up understanding the value of $1 and also understanding the value of myself, because something about those experiences instilled a sense in me that living is worthwhile. I don't know what it was, but around that time, after all that shit, I ended up coming to the conclusion that suicide was not an option, and that it never was an option, and that living is worth doing. I already felt like that prior to getting my first job. After I detransitioned, a lot of my suicidal thoughts ended up going away, and instantly, almost instantly, I started feeling more comfortable around other people, happier in general, and a lot more mentally stable. And I started to see a lot of my money problems go away, even just with that simple change. And then I get a job, and what happens when I get a job happened. I lost a lot of sleep, and I got suicidal as a result of that because I thought that was going to be my entire life. I quit the job, and then my suicidal ideation stops, and I get a lot better with money as a result of understanding exactly how much $1 is worth from having a job, but also from the lack of impulsivity I ended up finding after the detransition and everything else. So there were multiple factors at play here that went on to improve my mental health. Detransitioning made me a lot less impulsive and a lot less sad in general. Having these experiences with working different jobs and also with being homeless also seemed to cause me to be a lot less depressed. They seemed to cause me to appreciate my life a lot more. And I don't know what it was about those experiences, but I came away from them a lot more responsible, a lot more respectable, and in general, well-rounded. And that's why I'm no longer terrible with money. A while back, I did a nostalgia-centric video going through the icons on my PlayStation 2 memory card, as in the icons that they create for all of the games that you've been playing. And some of them have pretty cool animations that they program to go into the game. Others don't. Like Shepherd's Crossing, this was a later PS2 title from, I want to say either 2008 or 2009, and you get this little duck that's moving back and forth, and that's pretty cool. Disaster Report just has a backpack, which is really not befitting of what is a very good game. There's my system configuration data. Apparently Red Faction 2 has this moving star, and then Armored Core 2 has nothing, which is typical. Kill Switch Half-Life has nothing, and then Area 51 has nothing. But these two guys, the original Jack and Daxter, I don't know if you can see this very well, it has Jack clamping his foot down to the ground repeatedly again and again, and then Shepherd's Crossing has this little moving guy. Now, if I remember correctly, Sonic Unleashed has a cool animation, and a couple of the later Ratchet games do. But the point I'm making here is if you're playing on original hardware, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get Soul, you're going to get Kino, you're going to get Comfy, and if you're emulating all of these games, you can't necessarily go into the system memory and look at all of the animations. To my knowledge, you can't do this on the PS3 either. If you're playing on the PS3 and using the backwards compatibility, you get emulated memory cards, but they don't show you the cool animations that you get on the original console. So if you want to have this, you have to have an original console, which of course is going to look like shit on a flat screen TV unless you're substantially upscaling it and you have like OLED or some shit. But I mean, even then, even if you're using the RetroTink 5X Pro like I'm using on this TV, you're running it through an M Classic, which will upscale even further, and you do all that to play it on the modern TVs, you're still going to be missing something that you get with the CRT. Now, of course, this is an HD CRT, so there's more there, and that's why I'm able to run it through the RetroTink 5X and make it look better. But if I didn't have access to any of that, I would just play this stuff on the PS3 or on an emulator. But I would lose something as a result of that. Not just the feeling one gets when they take out a game on their shelf and maybe they peruse through the manual, they put the game in their console, close it, and then use an authentic controller. It's not just that you're losing. You're also losing this. Soul. This is Soul. You don't even know. This is Soul.